So, instead of a keynote, we are going to have a conversation with Howard Behar, who, as you probably know, was the founding president of Starbucks International, has spent over 50 years of his life in consumer-oriented business. And I find this totally incredible. When he started, there were 28 Starbucks stores. And when he was finished, there was 15,000. So I think 15,000 over 5 continents. Is that right? I'll just leave it at that. And we're going to have a conversation. And so help me welcome to the stage Howard Behar, please. So he didn't ask me to do this, but you have a new book.
I do.
Yeah, The Magic Cup.
Right.
Would you like to say something about that?
Well, it's a pretty simple little book. It's a fable about just what we all know. What you put into your life is what you get out of it. And it's a story about a leader that takes on challenges. It's kind of where Harry Potter meets business. And it's about values and virtues and how we can lead a better and more fulfilling life and do it in a way that honors humanity. So
beautiful.
That's what it is.
So why, on that note, why is it important for you to be at an event like the Mindful Business Conference?
Because I just got to learn something, primarily, right?
Yeah.
I want to be here to learn, and the opportunity to learn from others and also to share what I believe in too. That we sit here and we listen to a guy like Chris, and that's so far beyond anything I could imagine in my life. Although, Chris, I don't know where you are, but there was a Starbucks coffee store everywhere you were. Now, there's right in Waimea, right? There's a fire station that sits out there, and then there's a grocery store and there's a Starbucks store. I used to sit up at that Starbucks store and watch the idiots go. Watch people that were mindful going through these ways, and I'm thinking, who are those people? But they were all coming up to get a cup of coffee, so I loved them.
So now we know.
Yeah.
So what have values like mindfulness and awareness, and you talked about humanity? How does that play a role in your business life?
It's everything in my business life. I learned early on. I started. I don't remember this. Before mindfulness, we had TM. Anybody remember Transcendental Meditation? So 45 years ago, I started on my TM journey. There was a book called TM in Business, and we brought Transcendental Meditation into a business that I was president of at the time, and started that journey, and I've continued on with it. And I remember when I got this call about mindfulness, I said, mindfulness, that sounds familiar, right? And I said, is it like Transcendental Meditation? Yeah, exactly. So I started when I was in my mid-20s trying to figure out who I was. And what mattered to me. And that journey started with trying to figure out what my values were, who I was as a person, who was Howard. And so I created this picture of Howard in less than 50 words, starting with my values, my mission statement, and then how I do everything. And so it all fit together for me, and that's how I tried to lead organizations, with that first, but understanding what our values were first, because that was everything.
How did you figure out what your values are? And do you, in our prep conversation, we talked about this. What are those? What are those statements?
Well, I have 8 core values. My first one is honesty. And everybody in this room, if I asked, are you an honest person? Everybody'd go through, they'd say, yes, I am. But what I've learned is that at the end of the day, we all will define honesty just a little bit different. There are things that some of us will do, things that some of us won't do, all in the definition under honesty. And so I've learned that you have to define for yourself what that means and how it informs the decisions you make in life and how it informs your action. And you have to be thoughtful about that. And so all the way from honesty, caring, trust, giving trust before you get trust, love, giving love before you get love, caring, and I'll go on and on. But I started with 300 words, and it took me about a year to get it down to 8. that really matter to me, and they're not unique to me. A lot of people would use the same ones. So, but the most important part wasn't those words. It was how you took those words and you turned them into actions. Because a value is just a word unless it becomes an action. And that's what really matters most, is what are the actions that support those values.
So what's interesting to me is you always lead with the good intention. You trust before.
Yes.
Right. I was talking to somebody the other day who declared that trust has to be earned. And then I was thinking, well, when do you decide? Where's the tipping point where you actually decide to trust someone, but you take the opposite?
Yeah, it's an interesting story how I got there. My mother was an immigrant from Latvia in the early 1900s. She was Jewish, and if you've ever seen Fiddler on the Roof, that is almost exactly my mother's story. She lived in a small village. Father was a shoemaker, and there was a tevye delivering milk all around. And her life was not very good because at that time, Tsarist Russia was in control of Latvia. And so every once in a while, there would be a pogrom where they would come in and Russian soldiers would come in and take a few people off, never to be seen again. And my mother lost 2 brothers. And so my mother became very untrusting because of her experiences. And as I grew up, I pushed back against that and said, that's not how I want to live. I know those are your experiences, but I don't want to come from there. And so I had to learn to become trusting, and I just made up my mind that I was going to give trust before I got trust. And that, it for me, made my life work. I don't have judgment on my mother. It's what probably protected her at the time. It's how she thought of her life. But for me, I wanted to be totally different. So I've always had this internal drive to trust before I got trust and to love before I received love. And it's just worked for me.
And how does that, let's switch to business a little bit. How does that play out in your business?
Oh, it is everything in business. When you have a group of people that trust each other, then they're able to accomplish incredible things because they never worry about who's behind them. They always know there's somebody there. And they always know there's somebody to help them that's ahead of them. And so it allows you to do things that you never thought were possible. It's like what Chris was talking about, only it's in the context of an organization. So trust and love drive organizations. It's the same thing that drives a family. It drives a relationship. And I always relate the two. I don't think there's any separation between what goes on in the family of one, self, the family of 2, you and another person, or the family of 5 with children. What are the 2 things that make it work? Is trust and love. And when you have great trust and love, then the communication is automatically great. And that's what makes an organization work, whether it's an organization of 1 or an organization of 250,000 like Starbucks was. And that's the only thing that made Starbucks work.
So what does that look like in an organizational context? I mean, it's interesting how untrusting and jaded so much of the working population is now, and maybe not unwarranted.
No, it's totally warranted. It's what we do is we hire people into our organizations. All of us maybe have hired somebody into our organization. You recruit them and you bring them in. You're excited about having the new person, and that what you do is give them the handbook. And the handbook, the first 30 pages of the handbook says everything that you shouldn't do, and if you do it, you're going to be penalized under the law, right? And you got to sign it in ink, and the whole idea changes the whole thing because immediately you're starting with this idea that I don't trust you. First is starting with the handbook. We're glad that you're here. Here's what we're trying to do together. Here's what we think you contribute, and I want to help you. Heck with the handbook, heck with signing all that stuff. And when you start that way, then all of a sudden there's a mindset in the organization of what kind of place you're at and what you can do together. And it's totally different than the organization that starts out by not trusting the people. I have this saying that I call the person who sweeps the floor should choose the broom. And what I mean, just exactly that. If you're hiring somebody to sweep the floor, who better knows what broom to choose than that person that's doing the work? And yet all too often we want to tell all of our people what kind of broom to choose, how to do their job, exactly what to do and when to do it. If we truly trusted them, We're willing to let a few mistakes happen if they do, but and help them out of it and coach them out of it, then it changes your whole attitude towards your people and your people's attitudes towards you.
So you're saying, in reference to Chris's talk, most places start out with a big fear story.
Absolutely.
On day one.
Yeah.
And that colors their whole tenure.
Yeah.
You start out with a growth story and a possibility story.
Yeah. What are the possibilities? You know that old saying that you probably have said it, and I've said it. We're going to get along just fine here. Just don't surprise me, right? You heard that? Your boss says, "I don't want any surprises." But the truth is, you don't get. They want the good surprises. If you're in sales and you come with $1 million order that nobody expected, that's a surprise. Well, I got news for you. In order to get the good surprise, you got to get the surprise on the other end. And they go together and they work together, and that's how it all works. And so you can't worry about the ones that aren't going to be good. You enable the ones that are going to be good, and they come.
It's interesting, you're framing. One thing I noticed that you're framing about an organization is framing it through the questions of, this is a family, and is this the way you'd want to run your family?
Right.
And I thought that was really, I think there are some really fascinating parallels because it clarifies what actually do you want, right? What's the kind of environment you want to have?
Right. And then you live that.
Yeah.
No matter what happens, you have to live that. The worst thing in the world could happen, and Wall Street's mad at you, somebody's mad at you, your shareholders are mad, whatever, but you still have to live your values. And you have to stay straight and narrow. Once you give that up, you lose everything. Because what happens is you lose trust with your people. And the minute you lose trust with your people, everything starts to fall apart. And it takes forever to gain it back. And sometimes you never gain it back.
So how come so many organizations, in your mind, don't make that job number one?
Fear.
The cultivation of trust.
Fear. Most leaders in business organizations are fearful of being judged, fearful of not producing results. And that's what gets it. They're not thinking about what can be and what could be, and they're not trusting their people, but they create fear in their organizations. And the minute you create fear in your organization, right, nothing can happen because everybody starts protecting themselves. They don't want to be blamed. They don't want anything bad to happen. They don't want to be judged. The same things that happen with your kids. What happens when your kids aren't talking with you? They're fearful. Right? They're fearful of being judged in the family. And that's exactly what happens in an organization. So organizations that get rid of fear are organizations that have the best chance of success. And yet it's so darn hard to do that because leadership sometimes has a way of creating fear even unknowingly in the organization. They can say that people, whenever you hear this term, people are our greatest asset, run like hell. Right? Because people are not assets. Yeah. Trucks are assets, buildings are assets, computers are assets. People are human beings. People do great things and they do shitty things. That's the nature of the human, right? And what we want to do is help them do the great things by getting them through the shitty things, by letting them be in the moment, in both, by the way. When a disaster happens, you have to be in the moment, and when something fantastic happens, you have to be in the moment. And you have to celebrate both. It sounds like a strange thing, but you do.
Yeah.
So it's, leaders get caught up in their own fears. And, CEO wants to please Wall Street. They want to be known as a great CEO. And, many times that does the opposite of what they want to have happen.
How do you manage your own fear? I assume it's not by surfing, but...
No. Well, I start with a triple tall Americano every morning, and that immediately begins to wipe away all the fears. And by the time I have my second, I can fly. No, the way I've gotten through my own fears. You're looking at a guy that barely got out of high school. I had a couple of years at community college, never graduated. And so I learned all my lessons from other people, just like I learned from Chris today. I wrote down one of his quotes. And those quotes drive me. And I had one that stayed with me throughout my whole life. And it came from a guy, Ray Kroc, who started McDonald's. And it's just a short little quote. It says, "Turn your fear into faith." And that thing sits on my office wall. I have looked at that quote 10,000 times. And it reminded me and it brought me back to now, to being in the moment. Every time I look at that. And I say it to myself in mornings like when I have to get it up in front of people. As I say that quote over and over to myself, Howard, turn your fear into faith. And so it's little things that drive me. And it was primarily things from other people. And meditation. I've been meditating for 45 years. So meditation plays a key role in my life. Not every day. I'm not driven to it every day, but it's always there when I need it. I was amazing as I was sitting here this morning. I was right just immediately back into it.
What does it do for you?
Totally, it grounds me. Right? I went right to the floor, into the roots. I could feel the roots going down through my feet into the floor. Just totally grounded me. Right? And my brain just quieted down. My whole body just relaxed.
Yeah. What was a situation where the fear took over? And how did you manage your way out of it?
Usually when fear takes over is when I am feeling out of control, when I'm feeling not in control of something. So when maybe greatly disappointed in something, and it's something that I just don't feel I can get control of, and it's all fiction, it's all fictitious, and it's the only way I get out of it is self-talk. And I have this little board of directors that sits on my shoulders. And they're talking at me all the time, just like they're talking to you right now. You all have a board, in case you don't know it. But I learned to acknowledge it. And so I have one board member that is constantly pushing the fear angle. Is always telling me, hey, Howard, watch out, this thing could burn you. Howard, be careful here. And then I have other board members that, hey, Howard, you're great. That one that says you can do no wrong. And then I have one that is always saying, Howard, it's okay, this too shall pass, just like Chris was talking about, and calming me down. And so those board members play a role in my life, and I have learned to manage them. It's a hard thing to do because they're yapping at you all the time, and in your most fearful moments, when I'm most feeling like I'm not in control or that I'm disappointed about something, I have to find that board member that says, this too shall pass. And I can't, what I've learned is I can't say to the other one, shut up, because if I do that, they come back with a vengeance. But if I say to them, I hear you, but I don't have time for you now. And I say, okay, the one that's talking to me and saying, this too shall pass, I say, thank you, come into my life. And I welcome that person. The other one's quiet down, and I have room and space for this one that's sitting over here. But it took me a long time to learn to manage that. And I found that, at least in my life, in order to have a fulfilling life, which includes happiness, sadness, disappointment, anger, fear, all the things, joy, all those things, because that's fulfillment, right? It's not just being happy. That in order to have a fulfilling life, I had to learn to manage that board, all those board members. The fearful one sometimes protects me. So it's not always rejection, because sometimes it says keep your hand off the stove. And sometimes I can be putting my hand on the stove without thinking about it.
Yeah, I think one of the themes of the morning already is that there aren't really negative emotions.
No.
They're protective emotions.
They're not. They're just emotions. They're not negative. But knowing where they belong at what point in time.
Let's shift the conversation a little bit. So away from the individual to how do you manage a system of, 15,000 stores? And how do you create a system that either doesn't create fear or takes fear out? How do you do that with so many people?
It's, you have to live it. You have to live it every day. And no matter what happens, you have to stay with it. So, and every time Starbucks broke down, it was because we didn't do that. It was because somebody went into the blame mode. Somebody went into the fear mode, the fear of disappointment, the fear of not succeeding mode. And when that happened, then I used to say it was a spoonful of trust was taken out from the foundation of the organization. So the way I did it is that, first of all, I had to be okay with Howard. Howard had to be whole. And so I had to be in the moment with myself. But I learned that I was the chief message deliverer, that the people were my day job and the business was my night job. That I had to spend all my working hours, all my days, in the mode of the people, the human beings that worked in our organizations and the human beings that we're serving. And I probably gave the same speech 25,000 times at least to people all over the world. And the speech was about, this place is about people, not coffee. And I used to say that we're not in the coffee business serving people, but we're in the people business serving coffee. And that everything we did in Starbucks had to be about serving another human being. First, serving the people that worked in the organization, and then serving the people that we call our customers, those human beings. And I was relentless about that. And you know what was amazing to me is it didn't make any difference what language the people spoke, because I gave the same speech in every country that we operated in across the world. And people understood. And we allowed people to hold leadership accountable. Matter of fact, we wanted them to hold us accountable. We had a program called Mission Review, and it went in every paycheck. And they could write a comment about where they thought we either were living up to our mission or where we weren't. And we had to respond to them. And we took all that information, and we were, because businesses, just like families, are living, breathing organisms. And you have to stay with it, because a lot of things are happening all the time. And particularly when you got 15,000 stores, and now they have 24,000 stores, and over 300,000 people that work for the company directly, over 1.5 million indirectly. You have to be telling the same story all the time, and you have to reinforce it. And like every organization, there are some people, there are some board members, so to speak, that shouldn't be there. And like Jim Collins says, you have to let the organization eject them. And that's usually what happens. Sometimes the organization doesn't quite have the ability to eject them. And leadership, that's where leadership has to take over. And if we've said these are our values, then everybody has to live up to those values. It doesn't make any difference whether you're the executive vice president of IT. If you abuse people, then you don't have a place at Starbucks. Maybe there's another place for it. We can still love you. We can still care about you as a human being, but you just don't belong here. And so organizations have to live by that. There's no way out. The minute you start breaking that rule, then your organization starts to break down, trust starts to break down, love breaks down, and you start to lose who you are.
One thing I walked away with from our first conversation was the idea that even if a person was technically brilliant or a genius at their job, that if they were not in alignment with the values, that
they can't stay. I don't care how many dollars in sales they make. I don't care how good they are. If they can't live up to the values of the organization, they just can't be there. And the biggest mistake leaders make is by allowing that to happen. The quickest way to destroy a company is to allow, particularly leaders in your organization, that don't live up to the values, because all of a sudden everybody looks at you and say, you don't mean what you say. And the minute that happens, the game is over. You have to mean what you say and say what you mean.
So what I like about this is, even though in the Mindful Business Conference, it's really not about how do you bring meditation to the workplace. It's really about how do you bring a quality of attention to the actions that you're bringing.
Meditation is a tool. That's all it is. Meditation by itself is meaningless. All it is there to help us. And we should use it when we need it, not use it when we don't need it. And if we want to do it every day, great. But it is no more or no less. We shouldn't worship the God of meditation, right? We should worship the God of treating people well, the God of humanity. That's who we want to worship. And meditation can help us do that. And that's what it's there to do.
Do we have space for questions? Yeah. Please.
You mentioned your core values.
One moment. Do you want us to wait for a microphone? Yeah. I think they want to record. Yeah. Thanks.
Nice to meet you, by the way. You mentioned your 8 core values. You mentioned a couple of them. Can you kind of go down the line of what they all are?
Sure. So let me see if I can remember everything. So first one is honesty. The second one is trust. The third one is caring. The fourth one is love. The fifth one is respect for self and others. The sixth one is give more than you get. The seventh one is, oh man, sorry. Can I come back to you?
Yeah.
My mind just went blank. Okay. So the most important things is my mission statement. It's what drives me. And it goes like this. Every day I nurture and inspire the human spirit. Every day I nurture and inspire the human spirit, beginning with myself first and then for others. Beginning with myself first and then for others. And the reason why I say self first is that like I said before, I've learned that if I don't take care of myself mentally and physically, then it's very difficult to take care of another human being. And nurturing and inspiring the human spirit, it's not that every day I directly do something for another human being. Sometimes it's just picking a piece of paper up off the street. I don't let a day go by. I don't go to bed at night unless I've picked a piece of paper up off the street and put it in a garbage can or put it in my pocket and thrown it away together. It might be a cup also. And that it keeps me humble. It keeps me at one with the world. And the good part about it, where I live in Seattle, I live downtown, there's a never-ending supply of keeping me humble. And then I have my 6 Ps, and they go like this. That the first P is purpose. And everything I do in life has to have a purpose greater than myself, something that serves another human being. The second P is passion, just like Chris said. If you've got a purpose greater than yourself, then you darn well better be passionate about it. Yell it from the highest hills, tell everybody you know, and scream it inside your brain why you're here and how it excites you and gives you the enthusiasm to take each day. And then the third P, persistence. Persistence is everything in life. I've worked for entrepreneurs my whole life. If there's one word that would describe every entrepreneur, it's persistent. Every human being there has rocks in their river, rocks in the roads, mountains ahead of them. Most of them that you place there yourself, but sometimes others place there, or sometimes they're just naturally there. You got to figure out a way to go around them, under them, over them, and be persistent about everything you do, because it's the only way you ever accomplish anything. The fourth P is patience. Patience I didn't really learn well until I had grandchildren. And they teach you patience. They hold you accountable. And the most difficult person you'll ever have to have patience with is self, right? Because we're impatient about ourselves, and sometimes we're impatient with others. But we have to learn to have patience. Not everybody comes at the same pace. It's like doing mindfulness work or meditation work. You know, you can preach all you want, but people have to come on their own pace. You can't force somebody to do it. All you can do is show why it works for you and then invite them to join you. And if they choose not to accept that invitation, you have to have patience with them. Then the fifth P is performance. We hate this word. Human beings hate this word. It's the biggest argument that we're having right now in this country is about performance, particularly in the education arena. Nobody wants to be measured, right? The teachers don't want to be measured. The students don't want to be measured. The parents of the students don't want to be measured. The administrators don't want to be measured. Why is that? Because it's fear of failure. It's fear that they'll be judged. We are getting measured every day, whether we like it or not. How many of you have significant others or are married? Okay, I got news for you. Your significant other or your spouse is measuring you every day. Okay? They may not be doing performance reviews, but trust me, they would like to, and you would like to do it with them. and the only thing that keeps you from doing it is the fear of what's going to happen to your butt as it's bouncing out the front door. But performance counts. Performance counts in life. The performance that you commit to yourself, the performance that you commit to others. Whether it's little things in your family life, like taking out the garbage, performance makes a difference, and it makes a difference in our professional lives. When you make a commitment, you've got to live up to your performance, right? It counts in our world, like it or not, and so we got to get comfortable with it. We got to forgive ourselves when we don't perform, right? But we've got to always trying to perform to the best of our abilities. And then the most important P, single most important P, people. Nothing happened, we're not here to do anything else in life. I don't care what job you do. I don't care what you make. I don't care what service you provide. I don't care how far you think you are from that person, that end customer. You are serving that person. If you're a widget maker making widgets that go into a printing press, and the printing press gets sold to a publisher, and a publisher prints a magazine or newspaper that gets delivered to somebody's home to inform or entertain, the widget maker is as important in serving human beings as the person that wrote the story. Because without each other, nothing happens. And so everything is about people. So a long-winded answer to the vet too. Okay.
Hi, I'm really glad that last P was people, because that was my question. It's about people. You've mentioned being human and that quality a number of times and how important that is within business. I'm just wondering, in that context, what your thoughts are on kind of Starbucks and retail as it's now moving to more self-service. If I take that, I'm from Ireland, I love going into Starbucks and having a bit of banter, a bit of crack with the guys behind the desk. Yeah. But now I'm able to pre-order on an app and just pick up and have no human interaction. I find that quite difficult. What do you think?
Well, everything's moving at such a fast clip. Technology is moving at warp speed. And it's always made us uncomfortable because we're a high-touch organization. But people come in and there's some people that, you got to remember what our job is to give people basically where they want to go. And so some people come in the morning, all of you are different, and it be different every morning. Some of you want to come in the morning, you want a hot cup of coffee, no conversation, you want in and you want out. Sometimes you come in and your child just got the full ride scholarship to Harvard and you're dying to tell somebody, and you want to tell the barista. And I used to say to our people, you're social workers, and you got less than 10 seconds to determine where that person is in front of you. Do they just want that cup of coffee hot, no conversation, because they just got a speeding ticket and they don't want to talk to anybody? Or they want to talk about their kid getting the full ride to Harvard? And you have to be in tune with that. You have to have antenna that go up into your head and are able to feel it right away. And so we're responding to what's going on in the marketplace. And when I first started, we didn't have any chairs in the stores. It wasn't a place where you could go sit and just have a cup of coffee or not have a cup of coffee, just talk to somebody. And we were listening to the people that were saying, I want a place to sit. We went screaming and yelling into that because our real estate people didn't want to pay for the extra space. And I was an operator. I said, well, that's what our people want. Let's just try it. And of course, it was the boon to the business, right? That's where people go. So I think what we are saying is a response to the marketplace. I hope that we never lose our humanity. And I don't think we will, because at the end of the day, that's what counts. And we should be able to do both, right? We should be able to do both. And we'll see how it all turns out. I am concerned about that. I'm particularly concerned about this whole focus on data. Right, and I always, I ask. So if your spouse comes home at night and says, "Honey, I'm unhappy," how much more data do you need? But yet organizations have forgotten how to listen. Right, they want to see it on a piece of paper with the Q&A and the yes or no's and this instead of going out and touching somebody, talking to that human being. I grew up, and I'm 72 years old, I grew up in the world of high touch. When I wanted data, I just went and talked to people. And when I talked to enough people, they gave me what I needed. And it's the best data, because you see the emotion behind it and you feel what it's about. So, we'll see what happens.
It's interesting. It's another kind of expression of lack of trust.
Yeah.
That we don't trust our own experience.
Yeah.
Of what's right in front of us, and we need complicated systems.
We have forgotten how to listen. I have this belief that the walls talk. All right, now this will even go past these people in this room, the mindfulness people. But here's what I want to challenge you to do. The next time you go to a friend's home and they offer to get you something to drink, don't follow them into the kitchen. Go sit down in a chair on a sofa and close your eyes and listen. So all you have to do is listen. And I guarantee you, you will tune in to what's going on in that household. You will feel the energy. A mentor of mine taught me this. I grew up in the home furnishings business, and I worked for this guy, and he said, Howard, after the store closes, I want you to lock the doors and turn off all the lights, and I want you to go sit in the middle of the store, and I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to listen to what's going on in this store. And it was amazing of what it did for me. It works. You know when there's problems and when there's not. One time I did that, and God, I said, gee, there's something wrong here, but I don't know what it was. The next morning I went into the store and asked all the people in the store, is something up here? And there was. They were having a problem with something that I said, but nobody would talk to me about it. And from then on, I did it. Once a week, I'd go in and I'd close the doors, I'd turn off the lights, and I would go sit there just to see what the walls were saying to me. And try it, it works. And if you do that with your people, listen, truly listen, not with your ears, not with your eyes, but with your whole self. It's amazing what you'll learn.
We tend to think we can think our way through problems. And you're saying that we can sense our way through problems.
We sense our way through problems. That's how we do things. We think it's the other way. It isn't. We actually do. We sense our way through them. And that's how things work.
That's really profound.
Yeah. I mean, it's like with a baby. You got a 5-month, that baby communicating with you real, they can't say a word. Right? Babies don't know how to talk. But what does a mother is so in tune with that child, can sense things, right, before the child does anything. You can feel it coming, right? Or it's there. And fathers need to learn to do that. I think it's been one of the biggest struggles for fathers is to learn to do that. I learned to do it with my grandchildren. I was too busy with my children. But I remember when my first grandchild was born, Sydney. She's now 15 years old. And I remember one night I was taking care of her. She was about a month old, and her parents were going to have a date night, and my wife had to do something else. So here I am, with a grandfather with this little baby. I was scared to death, honest to God. And she just wouldn't stop crying. And it was bedtime, and so I took her, and I remember somebody says, well, don't hold her like this. Hold her, have her belly on your arm, and like this. I was holding her like this, and I took my finger and I put it in her mouth, I washed my hands. Okay. And she started sucking on my finger. And it was the most incredible, I will never forget that experience as long as I live. I was in touch with that child. I could just feel, she and I were one at that moment in time. And she immediately stopped crying, and I felt her body just go limp and went to sleep. And I just, like this, it was the most amazing experience. But I knew at that point what mothers feel.
Would you like to come babysit?
Huh?
Would you like to come babysit?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
You sound pretty good.
It is. There's nothing better. Yes.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. I was just curious whether you, Jeremy mentioned that you don't believe there's anything called negative emotions, if I understood that correctly. But
that I don't believe what?
There's anything like negative emotions. Everything, all the emotions you can use. Do you believe like all the emotions?
Yeah, they're just emotion, right?
Okay. Like for example, I was just wondering, like hatred, jealousy. Can you transform those from a business standpoint into something positive, or do you think that it kind of blurs your judgment?
Can I transform?
Like emotions like hatred, jealousy, those kind of emotions. Do you also use those from a business standpoint?
Look, it doesn't make any difference what people are feeling, because at any one time in an organization of 250 or 300,000, you have every feeling in the world going on all at the same time. The key is to acknowledge it. Okay, not to reject it, not to push back on it, but to bring it towards you and to allow people to see that you're bringing it towards you. But the first thing is to be aware of it, right? People come in the morning in the store, that old adage, leave your problems at home. That's bullshit. Excuse the expression. Nobody leaves their problems at home. Nobody, including yourselves. The big bosses least of all. But what do you get to do if you're a big boss? You get to go in, lock your door, right? Not let anybody in, or you get to take off and go have a cup of coffee. If you're a really big boss, you go play golf, right? But the key is when your people are coming in, be in tune with them. You know, if you're in tune with your people, you will feel what's going on. You may not know exactly what's causing it, but you got to ask the question, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? Right? They'll tell you, and you'll get the story. And the minute you do that, the minute they know that you care about them, what happens to all that emotion, the jealousy, the anger? It is because they know somebody is in tune with them and somebody cares about them. And it buzzes, it just takes it all away. What happens when you say, hey, I don't have time for you? Even if you don't say it in words, you just roll your eyes because, you know, they've come in with stuff and you say, you know, don't bring that stuff to work. Leave that stuff at home. What happens? They drive it inside themselves and it gets worse. And then if you're in a business like Starbucks where you got to go serve people every day, what happens when they're serving people? Doesn't that exactly come out? You feel it. If you've come into Starbucks, I was in one this morning, and I had an unmindful experience where there was somebody at the front counter that was into self. I knew she did not have time for me at all. I could feel it, and it was not pleasant. I didn't say anything. I don't judge it because it's where they are. I've been in that organization so long, I understand. But you don't have. Why should you have to be there? You're the people we're serving. And she forgot why she was there. She forgot there she was to help you to have a better day, to serve you. And so, you know, somebody in that store, if there's somebody in that store that's leading that store, they should be in tune with that and help those people out of that. And maybe that person was having a problem. I don't know what her problems were. But it happens.
Yeah, it's interesting. Under the guise of professionalism, we pretend emotions don't exist.
No, they exist everywhere, all the time. They're going on all the time. Every meeting that you have, right, with another person, somebody's feeling something.
Steve, how are we on time? Okay. Yeah. Very good. One more question? The floor recognizes the good Mr. Boyce.
Howard, my daughter is a manager of a Starbucks store in Toronto and also trains other managers. And she grew up in a mindfulness household. And I've learned so much from her since she started working at Starbucks. It's been really great. You said that we fear performance measurement, but then you were saying we are too addicted to data. So how do those two square for you?
Well, data doesn't necessarily determine performance. It's part of it, but it's not what really drives performance. When I talk about performance, I'm talking about human performance, how we work with each other, how we do things together, those kinds of things that matter in a relationship. Right? When we talk about performance in a relationship, it's basically how am I feeling about our relationship? How am I feeling about where we are together as a family? How am I feeling about now? And we measure that. Organizations measure that. And it comes out in data, but it isn't. When I talk about data, I'm talking about over-reliance on numbers and not enough reliance on conversation and talk and where people are and feelings. So, you know, there's measurement called what's it called? Engagement scores, right? Everybody knows about that. If you're in human resources in a large organization, you're probably measuring engagement. But all right, so you go out and you run this survey and you get back all this information, this data. So you have data. Now what? You have that data. Well, the data means somebody was feeling something somewhere. You've got to keep digging down to where it's at. All the data does is give you a picture of what's going on at a very high level. It doesn't tell you what the people are really feeling and why they're feeling it. And that's the job of leadership, is to dig down until you get to where they are. Because trying to do it across the board, right? It's trying to say, well, the organization all feel, we use these numbers, 60% of the organization feels that way. It's not true. Maybe there's one measurement that 60% feels. They all feel something different with that measurement, right? It's not one thing, it's multiple things. And so it's being in tune with that. So the over-reliance of this big data. I used to get data when I'd go into a store. That was data. I'd talk to customers. They'd tell me, hey, we think, if you only serve blueberry muffins. If I heard it 20 times, then I knew we had to think about serving blueberry muffins. But that's what I'm talking about. You don't need to go out and get all the masses of data to know what's going on. And when you over-rely on it, you can be fooled with it.
The qualitative is as important as the quantitative.
It's more important. It's more important because what people feel is a lot more important than what they know. You know that old saying, people don't care how much you know, they want to know how much you care. And that's what drives organizations. And that's what drives people coming into Starbucks. What's made Starbucks work isn't the fact that we've got 15,000 or 24,000 stores or we serve a cup of coffee. You can go anywhere and get a cup of coffee. When we started, you could go anywhere and get a cup of coffee. Remember, they hated our coffee at the beginning. They used to call us Charbucks. How many remember that? Right? But we stayed with it because in terms of coffee, our value was dark roasted coffee. We wanted to, we weren't trying to be for everybody. We loved what our coffee was about. It was our creativity. But what mattered to us was a relationship with our people and the relationship with the people we were serving. And that's what has driven Starbucks. And I think if you're customers, you know that's really the only thing that matters. Because what happens when that relationship isn't happening? Just like what happened with me. I get a kind of bad feeling. I tighten up. But when it's right, when you walk into the store and they say, hi, Bob, or hi, Jim, will that be a double tall today? What does it make you feel like? It makes you feel like you're queen or king of the universe, like somebody cares. Right? They care more about you than they care about the dollar pasted on your forehead. And so that's what makes it work.
Great. Thank you. Well, I'm sure we could talk for another hour or two or maybe a week. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you.